Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Deon Kon, Senior Journalist XR Today, bringing you the latest and greatest from the VR, AR, and XR industry. And today we're going to be having a big news show, Fireside Chat, with just a few guests. And we are going to have on Roy Greener, technology journalist from XR Today, and Jay Latta from the Fusionist. So stay tuned. Hope you enjoy the show.
Today we're going to start off with Apple. They have reportedly, released their XR Vision Pro headset. They're going to do this from March, and this is massive news coming out because now we have a date. Now, what do you think about this, and do you think this is going to be a reasonable timeline? Jay, Roy, take it away.
Well, I mean, I can start off rather with that, and I think I think the interesting note is how real is that March deadline or that release window. I think it's fair to say that March may not be the definite release point for the Vision Pro. I think, yeah, it's a prediction, but I think it's far more realistic that it's most likely going to be delayed in my eyes, and we'll probably see a later release down the line in 2024. I think Apple also will probably want to see what Meta and Microsoft are really doing because they've got big roadmaps going into 2024, as with other headset vendors too. So I don't know how much I believe the March 24 release date. It might happen, but I think we might see something maybe mid-year after WWC or after a fallout of that more so. Because I think there's going to be quite a lot happening in the start of the year. And also we've seen that Apple in their previous, in the previous months, they've had to reduce their unit shipping numbers. I think they're going through a bit of a learning journey developing this device anyway. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's pushed back. And I wouldn't be surprised if we hear more delays and more hurdles, to be honest with you. But I don't think that's I don't think that's really speaking ill on the product or Apple itself. I just think it's a big new venture and they probably want to do it right.
Definitely.
I guess they will keep the March date. This slot will stay. It will not just be available for everyone. That's simply it is. So some kind of premier customers, it will be, let's say, the real pro users. So from any kind of media stuff and so on. I mean, the price tag, everyone is still talking about it, 35K, yada, 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 how much it hurts. It's a pro device, period. So it's for people who make money with this stuff. So for March, I'm expecting that they will deliver a few hundred devices, not the mass adoption. We've heard already it's limited more or less for March, US, UK, Canada, whatever. So really just a very, very tiny area of the globe. So the follow-ups then from July, August, something like this. But really the first bunch in March, I'm expecting for really these most important customers that it will be rolled out.
Yeah, definitely. Developers also. I think that's a fair point, actually. No, you probably are correct. Maybe the general release date be further down the year, but I wouldn't be surprised if they hand it out to end users, developers, and then maybe improve that general release product based on some beta testing. They're probably already doing that, secretly behind the scenes somewhere, aren't they?
Exactly.
Interesting thing is, when I look at the Apple Vision Pro, we see oftentimes they talk a lot about making the stripped down version of it a bit later on, where they're going to have more of a kind of mid-tier headset. And I think what they're doing right now is using the Pro, which is going to have the biggest specs on it, to kind of help develop that developer community. Mm-hmm. And to get the ecosystem going, because right now, even if they release something that goes live, if it doesn't have enough content, it doesn't have enough support with SDKs, it's going to be a massive flop because people aren't going to know exactly what they want to do with it. So you have this premium device with very bare bones, basically, support for it. I think that's the big mistake that they're trying to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
I think also.
Sure. So the only stripped down, let's say, Vision Pro that I would need is the one without ghosty eyes. Everything else they should keep in so that I can fully use it. Concerning the developments, concerning all the availability of apps, of functionality and so on, here was quite a clever move to include more or less during the whole iPhone 15 rollout, that this content, that as well some kind of recordings and so on for the spatial recordings, birthday parties and so on and so on. It was quite clever that they've embedded the iPhones into this. So there will be a whole bunch of already usable stuff. And making it in this multimodal way, so smartphone or iPad and the Vision Pro is, in my opinion, quite a clever way.
And I think as well, just following up from what you're saying there, Jay, we've already seen perhaps this pipeline or timeline rather happen this year, with Meta releasing the Quest Pro at a high price point, their first touch of mixed reality headsets that obviously didn't have a massive adoption rate, but then they probably took the technology and developmental and distribution lessons they learned from that and brought that into the Quest 3, which is a far cheaper consumer grade level. So maybe we might see that same process happen again. But as you say, Meta didn't have the iPhone equivalent interoperability. Apple do. So maybe that's going to allow them to do that same roadmap of an expensive device early in the year and a cheaper one down the line, but do it with a bit more experience and a bit more of a technology stack there too.
Absolutely. And who here is actually going to be getting the Quest 3 for Christmas? It's in the works. It's in the works, definitely. But yeah, great. Excellent commentary about that. And, we're just going to see exactly what they do with it because, who knows? Apple could at the very last minute say, oh, no, we have to push it back. And we have basically a repeat of 2022, which is going to be a bit of a nightmare for them and give Meta a huge advantage to continue, advancing its own headset. But yeah, great. We're going to talk a little bit about the next one. We talk about question number 2, or at least article number 2. So we talk about the Meta Quest 3, which is what we were just going on about. It's pretty much a game changer in the market right now. Now, we had some different kinds of solutions integrated into it, namely the one that you had talked about, I think, Roy. It was the AR remote guidance service. Now, what do you think about using the Meta Quest 3 for some enterprise, like some serious enterprise use cases?
I think while the technology's there and while the services are easy to be put on there, as seen with our Visio's remote instructor or AR instructor service they put on. So the ability for it's there. I just still think wearability is sort of the big problem, and that's already being sort of forethought with the Vision Pro, where it's small, but it's still fairly chunky and sizable. And I think these devices, especially the big headsets, the Quest 3, Vision Pro, what have you, will struggle for long-term usage because I think it's still that issue of people having a large goggle-like device on their face for a long period. I think that's just going to intrinsically put a certain demographic off, certain groups of people off. However, I do think, on the other hand, services like the one brought over to Quest 3 have massive usage in terms of their portability to smart glasses, where it's a bit easier to use for longer periods, or assistive reality devices too. But I think it's important that the Quest 3 gets these very heavy enterprise facing services on their headsets, because they're moving into their industrial metaverse, marketing and push there. So they need as many of these services as they can. I don't know how widely the Meta Quest 3 is going to be used in enterprise, because I think there's, again, more focused and more enterprise facing devices, but they're trying and they're getting the services on there. So, I think it's just going to be a bit of a slow burn for them, really.
My love and hate to Meta. The issue is it's still Meta. Small and medium enterprises, yes, they might adopt quite earlier. Huge players, it's still Meta. Meta would need to reinvent themselves or simply to make some kind of spin-off, similar to Toyota. When Toyota wanted to sell cars in the US, it was still small, cheap Toyota, reliable, but a Toyota. So therefore, they have invented the Lexus. Lexus stands for Luxury Export US. So simply to get somehow separated from the basic brand. The term Meta related to Facebook is burned in the enterprise area. Too many people that are still concerned and so on. So this is one of the biggest problems. You are completely right, Rory, with these bulky devices, because the second big issue is insurance on your workplace. If it's heavy, if it's big, I've seen, I will not name the player. It was completely glass. The guy fall down the stairs, it broke and cut his face. The insurance did not want to pay because it's an experimental device, emerging technologies. So nothing that was set as your everyday's usual, yada, yada, yada. It's the same like if you type messages on your phone, fall down the stairs, barely an insurance will cover that you've been simply dumped. So here, the second thing is really how secure, how safe are these devices? How portable are they? They do not obstruct anything. But beside of the hardware, pure hardware, and the branding, of course, use cases and easy access is the most important. If you have to, in industrial, if you have to suit up, to wear something, it's too complex, no one will use it. It really needs to be ready to use, like opening your notebook, writing something, closing it, it's done. So these devices need to be in the enterprise context, really need to be like fast food. Simply take it, use it, put it away. So as long this is not really somehow solved, and all the solutions currently are more or less expert solutions, it will not fly. It will be just some kind of orchid pilot, proof of concept, yada, yada. And one significant problem here for Meta or any other player is this too much their own ecosystem, their own cloud services. You need to register at yada, 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 yada. They have to rethink this, my opinion, my experiences.
Before we jump in on that, we actually talked a lot about in the past the issues with Meta's transnational data flows, which has gotten into a heap of trouble with the European Parliament, also the GDPR regulators, which in turn, if you have a lot of data processing that goes back and forth between the service in the United States, it's going to create massive issues for a lot of the people unless they have full control over the device and they can actually own the hardware for themselves, use their own remote hardware device management type of systems, and then command the data flows that they have, selling it solely as a hardware device, because without that it's not going to work, not for the enterprise at least.
And there's also security concerns there too. There's safety concerns, but then there's a wide range of security concerns. And, I think it should be said that our Visio software that's being ported over is a very commendable, is a very reliable service. I think it's just that hardware it's being brought onto perhaps isn't really designed for industry enterprise, while others are very specifically security and in their actual physical design made for industry enterprise use. Think about RealWear is a great example where they make sure some of those devices are usable in factory settings. For example, the Meta Quest 3 would never be used in a factory setting, let's be honest.
No.
An additional factor with generative AI, or this merge of immersive tech and artificial intelligence, if we have something like this, brings a completely new dimension of cybersecurity or cyber threat with it. Majority of these algorithms are, for example, can be attacked via adversarial effects. So if you then wear your headset with built-in cameras, which all of them have, and you look onto the wrong label, it might immediately, simply some kind of optical virus, it might impact your industrial applications. So here, this full control becomes more and more important. Some kind of portable firewalls that are with you simply to protect all of this, because there are simply too many. I mean, recap, for example, Chinese phones. When we read over and over that there is some kind of malware already during the factory setup, embedded into some of these phones, that whole bunches need to be recalled. This is simply a huge issue that I see for the industrial metaverse or any kind of industrial IoT, that these entities need to be super focused on what is going on, what kind of dangers do I have, and where are the tipping points. And devices with cameras, if you are as an enterprise not in full control of this, is simply, I think, a huge uncertainty.
Definitely. There was one thing that one of my, former colleagues, Abhishek Prakash, he talked a lot about in his book, Next Geopolitics, where he's written about 4 different types of books on that. And what he talked about is how, we're going to divide ourselves amongst the different, geopolitical superstates of regions based on the technologies that we have and a lot of the different data flows, the way that, they record biometrics, for example, and then they process that through the different channels. We're now dealing with a fluid type of power structure between people and between entities, rather than it just being like Germany versus such and such or US versus such and such. And now that we're basically scrambling to create the policies needed to kind of moderate that in today's day and age. So I think if Meta was going to use it for like D&I training, it's something easy. They can just use mobile device management like they did with, I think it was Accenture. They got about 30,000 headsets. Yeah. And, that's one example, a use case, but how far can you expand beyond those use cases is another question, and to what extent can we share that data?
And as you say, the technology is moving faster than we can regulate it, whether that be governmental or in industry, enterprise, however you look at it. As soon as we catch up with the technology, we're 5 years behind with what's emerging. And, that's probably, that's key to adoption as well. We need to figure out, or the industry, really needs to figure out a sense of standardization just to make this all a bit easier so policymakers and decision makers can keep up.
Yeah, definitely. And I do see that, there are organizations that are trying to make those standards. I think the XRA has done quite a good job with that. XR for Europe is catching up, I think. I don't know what's happening on the Chinese side as well. That's usually goes through, their channels. But no, that said, I think that once they get the standards in place, then we'll have a common ground to work with when it comes to device usage. But yeah, I guess the last question we can chat about for this particular one, we talked about, Microsoft Ignite recently took place. And what were your thoughts on that particular event? And we were speaking a little bit about, having individual events for different organizations and companies. So, Jay, I'll kick it off with you. What did you think about the Microsoft Ignite event? And what do you think about the future of events in general?
Future of events in general, they need to change. They are still tailored to a time that we don't have anymore. simply it changed. You have these masses of people, you have people that are looking closely on the budgets. How I've stated already several times before, big corporates do not like these events where they are not in control of these events. So therefore, if it's an Ignite, if it's the AWS reInvent and so on, where they simply, everything pleases their own ego, they are in full control of the events and of the audience, of course. So we will see more and more shifts to these enterprise events, and the independent events in between need to reinvent themselves. So a web summit, for example, how we've seen it, will barely survive the future. It needs to be this kind of differentiation between give me some sparklings that can really be this visionary lead, then of course connecting with these corporate things so that they can simply transport their approved message. And more it will be a playground for startups. So that startups can simply reach out for investors, for strategic partners, etc., etc. So here, also the pricing structure will change. We might even see events where you pay 20 or 30K to be part of this super VIP sparkling and so on event where it will be then just broadcasted. We'll see. Microsoft in general, is a player that uses his own or its own power. I am not a fan of all of this cloudified stuff, because it just generates another kind of vendor lock-in. And what we've seen, for example, from my corporate history, for example, the big three cloud providers, this is some kind of race, whomever is doing something as first. The others will simply follow. But for these players, if a module, if some service does not bring revenue anymore, they simply stop it. And they don't give a damn if your business relies on this, if you really need to have it. So even a big corporate, if they are the only one who works in this with this specific module, it will be turned off. So this kind of depending on the goodwill of someone becomes a huge threat for any kind of economy, this cloudification of businesses. There was some kind of, from the European Union, some kind of tryout to standardize, to force, to implement some kind of decloudification. It's just on paper right now, in theory, talking about it, which might be quite a good protection, that if a service is being shut down, that they have simply to pass over to you, that you can use it on premise, some kind of basic functionality. We'll see who will win here. Microsoft themselves revealing their XR dynamic stuff and so on. Honestly, do you remember the Microsoft paperclip? The Office paperclip? This is my imagination of this stuff. Yeah. In my opinion, this is just slightly higher level.
Yeah, a good old AI clip. You know, there was a funny thing. Every time I think about that clip, I think about Max Tegmark and what he was talking about with artificial general intelligence and superintelligence. He said that, what if we program it in the wrong way, and all it plans to do is take over the entire universe and turn it into nothing but paper clips? And I see that little guy with his beady eyes, you know, like staring back at us like, would you like to do this with your document?
Right. Look, the thing is, we need, or this is exactly what I'm currently writing about, this irrational history of AI, the paperclip story, and so on. The thing is, what is the motivation for an AI? The Maslow pyramid of needs for humans cannot be adapted on the machine intelligence, if there is a machine intelligence, if we will ever see something like this. So here it's simply this current history, all of these concerns, we all will be killed by Terminators and so on, is just a projection of our own fears, of our expectations, what we expect from humans, and we simply expect that the machines will behave in the same way, which is simply BS, whatever. But Rory, you wanted to say something.
I mean, there's 2 points there. I'll follow up what you're saying about AI and then also break down some of the XR stuff from Ignite. I think it's really interesting with AI because I think it brings into the idea 2 kind of more broader topics. One, which is the uncanny valley. The other, which is how we just, if we see, say, steam on a window, we might think it looks like someone because we're applying, that's naturally what we do as creatures. We apply images, faces of things we recognize on those kind of messy spaces. And we're doing the same with AI. We have this perception of AI, so we're asserting that characteristic upon it. And really, we're doing the same thing as when someone looks at a toast burn and thinks it's Jesus. We're doing the exact same thing with AI. And then equally, there's the uncanny valley thing too, where, a lot of this AI is trying to replicate human-to-human interaction. And as you have a robot that looks a bit human, but it's not human, it's going to feel off to you. And the exact same thing can be applied to AI when it's conversational, when it's talking to you. You can tell, and even with writing and the images, everything AI generates, there's an uncanny valley element to it where it's not done by a human, but it kind of looks like it. I think that's the thing that's throwing everybody off. So, I think there's I think there's a few elements there in terms of the way we characterize AI, and I think there's, I think we should maybe settle down with the way we're thinking it's going to be a Terminator, because in the end of the day, in 30 years, it's going to look like something we've never imagined.
Exactly.
It's going to be completely different.
The current systems are just mimicking.
Yeah, that's what you see with so much science and technology. It's all adapted from Star Trek fans and stuff, isn't it? At the end of the day, they're just making that real.
Yeah, there's one thing I wanted to point out. Roy and both you and Jay mentioned this. We talk a little bit about the fact that AI is mimicking, at this particular moment in its development, human interactions. But unlike humans, which learn linearly, we see that AI actually learns exponentially. So today it's going to think one way. In 4 years, it's going to think completely different. And then in 10 years, it's going to be beyond our grasp. So it's going to go from ANI, which is artificial narrow intelligence, to artificial general intelligence, to artificial superintelligence on a curve, not necessarily simply just like linear like humans would think or learn.
Damon, I have to disagree with one thing. You said humans are learning in a linear way. No, we are being forced by the educational system to learn in this way. Humans, when they are not perverted from the school, learn in a different way.
Okay.
We are more using these cycles. So humans from their natural behavior are more circular beings. When we can return, when we can iterate, when we can cross-innovate, when we see and when we learn something, we learn multiple things at the same time. I don't want to talk about some kind of multi-threading or whatever. No, it's just whatever you are learning, it has impacts on several other domains. While artificial intelligence, this training of algorithms, you need to have tailored databases to train them. You cannot reuse these databases for different domains in artificial intelligence. Humans can. The AI, these algorithms, they need this kind of tailored database to learn out of it. So here, it's a little bit more complex. I'm not sure if I will see a general artificial intelligence within my lifetime, honestly.
Yeah, very interesting points you got there. And Roy, I was going to ask you about that. Definitely, I mean, both of you can jump in on this because what we're seeing now are a lot of companies quickly trying to integrate artificial intelligence into their workflows. That's with Dynamics 365, which was at the Microsoft Ignite event. Microsoft Mesh as well is using some generative AI qualities to design some of the virtual environments. So we're seeing a lot of this but there are no policies, there's no ethics, there's no committees. They're actually getting rid of their ethics committees. Like even Meta did it just a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. So what do you think about this?
I mean, I think with the ethics, I think it's quite interesting those have been shut down, to be honest with you. That's not something I was 100% aware of, but that's quite interesting because I think you mentioned the different ways AI can learn. And one I think you left out was it can learn spatially, and it will learn spatially with the introduction of AI into MR and VR services, as you were mentioning. You know, I think Meta and Microsoft are essentially saying, you know, AI and MR are now going to coexist together, especially with things like smart glasses, where AI can pick up all the brands around your house, whenever you're walking around. There's a lot of spatial data there that these data companies, which is what they are, can leverage at the end of the day. And perhaps a lack of ethics there is kind of a bit worrying in its own right, because you don't know what these companies perhaps are taking from you in terms of spatial data. Again, it's emerging. Can policymakers keep up with that? I imagine they will, because that's quite a big gap. But that's also another side of the enterprise. You know, how far are these MR, AI, generative, spatially scanning devices and software? What is that picking up? And how can an enterprise ensure security around that too? Is probably another element. But I think at the end of the day, what these companies or perhaps service providers can learn more from introducing AI and MR together, I think it's more about what the companies can gain from that rather than really giving anything to the end user. I think there's like developer, like generative AI stuff that can help develop XR developers in creating content, and then therefore introduce low code builders for enterprise. That exists. But I think perhaps outside of that, I'm interested to see how generative AI really plays a part, because I think it's going to be more for data collection. Because think about it, when you're in VR, all the movements of your hands, your head, all of that's tracked. So that can be useful from a training perspective for an end user, perhaps, but then it's also very useful for the vendors and the software service providers. And obviously that goes, as I've already mentioned, that falls right in hand with MR and smart glasses, and that whole consumer drive there. While there is a lot of opportunity for the end user, I think it's perhaps of more benefit to the service providers, as I say. I think generative AI will definitely have a place to stay in terms of 2D computing. But 3D, maybe it's just data collection.
As first ethics, do we really want from different companies having different ethical standards? No. In my opinion, this shall take place at the regulatory level. Each of us has his own moral compass, something like this. This is really what tells me it's good, it's bad. Ethics in general is a synthetic construct. We had before 9/11 a different kind of ethics than after 9/11, when waterboarding became a tool. We had before pandemic a different ethics than with the pandemic. Before pandemic, something like the triage was not known to the people, selecting whom to let survive. So ethics is in fact something, it's a bridge between moral, how do you experience things, is it good, is it bad, and the law, is it legal. Ethic is this construct simply that what might not be so moral, but it's legal, simply we put ethics onto it. So this is my take on ethics. The regulation on, we need to figure out what to do with technology, but then it needs to be prevented from the regulatory perspective that it's being used against the people. When I'm dealing with the developers, my first question is always, okay, fine, you want to develop this, cool. How would you feel if your development is being used against you? And then he starts thinking about it. Do I really want to implement this and that? So this is about ethics. The people need to be aware of technology. It's just a tool. It's not good. It's not bad. It's what we make out of it. Transparency is here a little bit more important because you need to know what the other suckers are doing with this technology. So this ethical, more important is to know what are they doing with it. Qui bono, what kind of benefit do they get out of this? You've mentioned, Rory, spatial data. How do we, and so on. So this interaction on Facebook, for example, when they just know user X, user Y, user Z, and so on, they are liking each other's content and so on. With spatial data, they can get the full overview of interaction. So body language and so on. This might be something tricky somehow to solve these issues. When it comes into AI, nearly all the companies that are now enriching their products with any kind of AI assistance, it's bullshitting. It's marketing. It's just to put another price tag on it or to have some kind of differentiation. Because if you roll out in your company, let's say 4 tools, and all 4 tools have an own AI assistant, what kind of nonsense is this? These artificial assistants, personal assistants, need to be at each of the computer side, so of the worker side. We need a workers augmentation, a workforce augmentation. So these people should have the assistants that learn how do I use these tools, what kind of workflows can I automatize, how to interact, so that even the data that is then being collected stays within your own assistant. This should be the goal. So instead of dealing with the Copilot from Microsoft and the yada yada from here and Lala and so on, it just messes up everything. It will make the people angry about it. Dealing, let's say an SAP assistant. When you use your SAP, let's say 2, 3, 4 times per year, and then an annoying assistant comes into this that starts to ask you because he does not remember you, it sucks. It will be just sucking on a higher level.
There's so many considerations that I think it's now getting to the situation where we feel like we're herding cats, and it's, there's no clear-cut way as to how to develop the committees. Well, I think that they're trying to do that with the XRA, the Metaverse Standards Forum, the IEEE, things like that. But there are so many layers to it. For example, with the IEEE, they have to do it on the hardware level. I think they're trying to do it with the XRA on the hardware level, but they're also thinking more about the best practices. So they're thinking at it more of a, not bureaucratic level, but more so like a policy level. And then you'll have other organizations that are probably going to form after this fact. But I think that they need to get the basics down first before they do anything else.
100%.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yes.
But yeah. Well, it's been an amazing chat. I think I kind of like this format sometimes. It's just really cool. Just, I was hanging out, chatting about what's going on in the news. Once again, my name is Deon Kon, Senior Journalist from XR Today. We've had on Rory Greener from XR Today and Jay Latt from the Fusionist. Thanks so much, guys, for joining today. And if you guys like to listen to the news like this, please join us at the XR News hashtags on Twitter and LinkedIn. So we're signing off. And until next time, keep following the news and see you then.